promoting the free exchange of ideas, questioning the status quo, and having some fun along the way. This is the Are We Idiots Show. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the Are We Idiots Show. As we mentioned, we are Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll. Kroller, how are you, buddy?
Good, Weave. Just surviving this blustery blizzard of March.
That was some alliteration there. We like alliteration on this show. We got a great show. And before we go into today's show, let me just quickly remind our listeners to go back and listen to our last show. It was on the role of the military, or the proper role of the U.S. military, and in a rare area of agreement, Kroller and I kind of decided that our richest allies should be defending themselves. But I give you I'm going to call it the 5-episode challenge. So you will be hooked on our show if you listen to 5 episodes. So we have one preface episode and then 4 episodes after today. So I'll give you 5 episodes. I'm calling it the 5-episode challenge. You'll be hooked on our show if you go back and do that. So
really sticking your neck out on this, huh?
you got to believe. But yeah, please do that. Follow us on Twitter and email us suggestions at areweidiots.com on future episodes. So this week's agenda, we're going to do the Idiot of the Week award, as we always do. Kroller's going to give me some suggestions for that this week. Then we're going to talk about the Immediate Gratification Nation.
IGN.
Bingo. And the problems associated with the human behavior of seeking immediate gratification and how that reflects on our government as well. Then I'm going to tell a quick story of when I was an idiot, and there's plenty of ammo there, but this is a particularly embarrassing story. And then we'll finish up the show with the debut of Rich's rant. And,
a lot of things bother me, and I typically don't rant publicly, but I'm glad to be able to do that.
Yeah, and from time to time, you just got to get it out. You can't
get it out. You can't let this stuff bind you up.
Bind you up or bottle up? Binding up, I think of another thing.
No, I'm constipated right now, so
should be an angry show. Okay, so Richie, it's over to you, buddy. You have some nominees for Idiot of the Week.
The first one is one of our favorite movie producers. Well, I say that facetiously, or is that sarcastically? Facetiously. Harvey Weinstein.
Oh my.
Harvey Weinstein, good-looking fella, for his defense with all the sexual assault allegations, his legal team is now using comments taken out of context from Meryl Streep and Jennifer Lawrence, saying that they didn't experience sexual assaults during their interaction with Harvey, which means these are clear examples of how the other 30 accusers or 50 accusers, whatever the number is now, are exaggerating. And also that since many of these accusers went on to have successful careers after the alleged assaults,
it was worth it? Is that what he's saying? That it's worth it?
That it couldn't have happened.
Oh, okay.
Like Gwyneth Paltrow.
Could they be emotionally scarred, or what's the?
Well, the point is, if Gwyneth Paltrow became this famous, successful actress, could have what I done to her? That's probably not right English, but could have what I did to her actually happened, or in the exaggerated tone that it's taken? So the defense is that
she'd be so scarred that she couldn't go on with life or something?
Correct. And that if these other reputable actresses like Jennifer Lawrence and Meryl Streep said that they weren't assaulted, although I heard it was taken out of context and now they both hate Harvey Weinstein. But so he's one of my nominees.
What a narcissist.
For Idiot of the Week.
Okay. Like you said last week, maybe that goes beyond idiot, but we'll go on to the next nominee.
Now, the next one could cause a little sensitivity with a small percentage of the population, and I am not attacking...
The bald people of the world?
No, there's a lot more bald people than this category.
Okay.
And this is not attacking transgender people at all, but I think we're getting a little too politically correct in a loony way. So... and once again, I'll preface this. I don't care if you're gay, lesbian, if you're transgender, hermaphrodite. I don't care what you are. If you're a good person, that's all that I need. But Laverne Cox, transgender actress, from Orange is the New Black has started a petition for Mattel to make a transgender Barbie doll.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, look, I know we have a Lara Croft Barbie doll, the action figure. We have a Chloe Kim Olympian Barbie doll. But do we really need a Barbie doll for every category in life? And I'm sensitive. If you're a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a man's body, I am sure that is a challenging, difficult, life-changing situation. But do I need a Barbie doll? Do we now need a eunuch Barbie doll, a hermaphrodite Barbie doll, a foot fetish Barbie doll? Do we need to cover every category out there? And by the way, this is for kids, right? Why do I need my 8-year-old daughter, exposed to some of this stuff, other than education and sensitivity? But
there's an appropriate age to bring up these, admittedly difficult topics.
Exactly. So I'm nominating Laverne Cox as the other idiot of the week.
Wow.
And maybe that's insensitive, but again, do we need a transgender Barbie doll?
I don't, but hey, I've already gone through my early years, and I preferred Ken in my early days.
Sure,
that's a different
story.
Rich, I got to go with Harvey Weinstein. I mean, he's a total scumbag. Everyone knows it. I'm so happy that he's been exposed as the rapist that he is. And I hope, and New York's still got a case open. There's no statute of limitations in New York City. They're going to press charges with rape. He's going to go to jail and get raped. So good for him. So Harvey Weinstein, you are the idiot of the week. And you probably could be the idiot of the year, but we'll give it to you for the week.
Good choice, and obviously strong reaction and opinion from my buddy Mark Weaver here.
All right, so Idiot of the Week is over, and we're going to move to our main topic of the day. And we've said this, if you listen to a couple episodes, we've used this term IGN, Immediate Gratification Nation. I'm not too sure we actually thought of it, but we'll take credit, won't we?
We have to take credit.
But the topic of the day is, kind of what we've observed, and my thesis, as I often put out, and Rich rips it apart, is essentially that if you look at surveys, and there's a bunch of them, I'll cite one from the University of Chicago and the Associated Press, but there's lots of them out there. A very high percentage of households couldn't afford a $1,000 emergency bill or an unexpected bill. The breakdown I have by income group is 75% of the people under $50,000 in income couldn't afford it. From $50,000 to $100,000, 67% of the people couldn't afford a $1,000 unprepared bill. And this is the one that got me, which is amazing to me. For people $100,000 and over in income, 38% of them couldn't afford a $1,000 or couldn't handle a $1,000 emergency bill or a bill that was unexpected. And we'll talk about retirement savings in a second, but that's to me is shocking. And in my mind, a lot of that has to do with the immediate gratification nation, and we'll talk about what I mean by that in a second. But initial feedback, comments about the stark nature of our financial budgets of our household.
Well, it's easy for us to sit here and throw mud because we do fairly well, right? We're IT sales folks, and we have a pretty darn good living, salary and commission, and I typically don't need for anything. Now, you're a little bit different. You like to buy your fancy cars, but I do think people live beyond their means. I have lived beyond my means and tried to correct that over the last 5 years. So I think a lot of people love new shiny toys and have a tough time saying no to a new car or the top shelf bottle of liquor or the filet mignon or the Kobe Bryant $200 sneakers. And maybe they really shouldn't even try to pay for that type of stuff. And that puts them in dire straits when emergencies pop up. So I'm sure it is a nationwide problem for most.
And, we'll talk about how this, for some of our listeners, we probably have a fairly affluent listener base, and they may be saying to themselves, well, this doesn't apply to me. And later on in the show, we'll talk a little bit about why we all should be concerned with this immediate gratification mindset, because all of our Congress folks, senators and congressmen, have this immediate gratification mindset. That's all they focus on is how they get elected and how they spend money in the present to the detriment of our kids and grandkids. So that's why it's important for all of us. But let's go back.
There is a waterfall effect, right? So we're starting with, are we overspending as a country on the basics of life? Then how does that impact our retirement savings? Are we saving for that? And then how does that lead to the government spending where there's $1 billion bridge to nowhere or $1,000 hammer or giving billions of dollars to Germany to protect themselves? So yes, it does have a trickle-down domino, cascading waterfall effect.
I like those analogies.
Thank you.
Just mention a couple more stats, and then we'll move on to kind of why this is happening, and I have some theories. But retirement savings from 50 to 55. This is really scary, folks. And again, I'm sure some of our listeners, aren't in this situation. But from 50 to 55, the median savings is $8,000. Now, obviously, median, there's people with multi-millions saved, and there's a lot of people with nothing. But still, that is a shocking number. And 46% of the people that have been surveyed over the years say that their number one financial regret is not saving enough. So my question is, if we all agree that there's a problem, how do we get here, Rich? What are your theories on how we get here? If we all agree we're spending too much and not saving enough, why? Well, I have some theories.
First, let me combat the statistics on retirement a little bit. Okay. Because I agree with the premise, but if you're going by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the GAO, who say as many as half of all households of Americans 55 and older have no retirement or savings at all, is that really true? Or is it a skewed statistic? Because as I dove into this, I found out that it's not necessarily true. This is about retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, but there's more savings out there than people realize. Supposedly 53% to 54% of near retirees are at record levels of savings, which is double where they were 22% in 1989. And are we accounting for, remember, 22 million Americans work for federal, state, and local governments.
And they have pensions.
And then Social Security. Now, Social Security is meant to be a supplement to your income, but I think there's a lot more revenue streams from Social Security, pensions, savings accounts that are not being added and then skewing the number.
I don't know, because if you look at the previous stats that I cited, they were all monies that you couldn't handle. 38% of the people above $100,000 can't handle a $1,000 unexpected bill. Well, that would indicate to me that there isn't much money saved. So
listen, I agree there's a problem. I just don't know if it's as grandiose as at least on the retirement category. But you asked me how we got here. I have the answer.
I have the answer. So you can
I have the answer.
You're wrong, I'm sure already. But go ahead. I'll let you be wrong first.
It's the procrastination, I can fix that later mentality, right? Because when you're 20, you can't, a 60-year-old sounds like a mummified non-possibility. It's so far out in the future, right? And even when you're 30, you're like, I still have 30 years to figure this out. When I'm 40, I have 20 years to figure this out. I'd rather have the Kobe Bryant sneakers or the Dom Perignon or your Maserati that's stuffed away in the garage. And I can always make it up. I'll get a better job. I'll double my savings. I'll change my lifestyle and behavior. I'll make up any deficit that would have been a lot easier to hit, every 5 years for 40 years.
So I totally disagree. I'm sure there are some people like that, but I would say the majority of the problem is just ignorance of financial literacy and a budget and discipline that goes along with that. So, you think back in school, and economics has always been my favorite subject from high school years. I read about it in my spare time.
That's why you're so darn boring.
I know.
If economics is your favorite subject, already people know that you're just really no fun.
Totally guilty as charged, right? But what I say is, think about it. Did we ever have a class on finance or bookkeeping or keeping a budget or, I shared with my adult kids a spreadsheet that had a budget and all the different categories that you could spend money on, and they were shocked. They were shocked at how many things. And I know that people out there don't think about it. They think car payment, rent payment, or housing payment, utilities, food, but they don't think about the things that could happen that are emergency bills. The car breaks down.
Yes, we know that college and college degrees do
Don't
not
handle that.
prep you
Right.
for real life, right?
Even
If you have a
high school.
finance degree,
High school, they should be given basic
I agree.
budgeting.
yeah, so that's part of the problem, right? If you have a finance degree or an economics degree or a linear algebra degree, it doesn't prep you for the realities of balancing a checkbook and properly budgeting for life.
And anticipating unexpected expenses that should be expected. I don't think people really think about things like that, and I think that's the biggest problem. I'm sure your theory has some relevance, and some people think they can make it up later. But I would say it's more ignorance than anything.
Or idiocy, right? So, but I do think I think it's a combination. I absolutely know people that have no inkling about, well, here's the other thing. So when you're a young guy or young gal making, 25, 30 grand a year, first job out of college, it's hard to contemplate saving 10 or 15% of that for retirement because after taxes, you're scrimping and scraping just to pay the bills anyway. So I think that's part of the problem, and it starts bad habits, and then you make 50 grand or you make 100 grand, and your toys and your bills and your mortgages get bigger, and then it's just a pattern for life.
So I would not accept that as an excuse. And I'm a big believer in individualism, as I've mentioned on other shows. Libertarians typically are that way, and kind of no excuses. You got to find a way to figure it out. That's the way I look at it. And I would say that at almost any income level, maybe if you're below the poverty level making 20 grand, that this doesn't qualify. But if you're making 40, 50 grand, you can find a way to adjust your lifestyle to save something all the way up. And, we've seen it with athletes, with movie stars, people that make $100 million and spend it all, right? So you can, at any income level, you can spend more than you make. And you just have to discipline yourself to spend less than you make.
Yeah, but that's like saying the kid born into a poverty situation in an inner city row home with no electricity, no father, should study and work out and be conscious of nutrition and be... Come on, a lot of it has to do with demographics. You were born to two great parents that taught you a lot of this stuff. Your dad made you get a job when you were 7 years old. You were brought up differently, and I think it's easier for you to say.
It certainly is, and there's people that were brought up in more affluent situations than me, and they had it easier than me. And the bottom line is, at some level, everyone's got to figure it out for themselves. My parents, like you brought them up, but my parents budgeted down to a quarter at the end of each week when they were first
25 cents.
25 cents. That's what they had left. And they just lived very modestly.
But you could buy a cheeseburger for 25 cents. So
this was, of course, in the 60s or 50s. But, the bottom line is not a lot of money no matter what. And at any level, you just have to adjust your lifestyle. You have to do without. You can't keep up with the Joneses. And we're bombarded in TV and media with all these images of how we should be living. But you have to discipline yourself to spend less than you make, period.
Agreed. I think we disagree on some of the ways we got here or why we get here. But okay, fine. Next. What's your next thesis?
My next thing is we just have to touch briefly on it. The totality of the problem that our immediate gratification Congress folk are and how they're damaging our country. So we have $21 trillion in debt. We're essentially living on a country credit card. We just had a tax rebate, which everyone's thrilled about, but what no one focuses on that we did it through deficit spending. We won't go into that today, but the bottom line is we're adding to the deficit with this. And just some numbers here. Our current federal interest rate is 1.5%. So 1.5% per year of $21 trillion is $315 billion a year in interest. That's with rates at historically low figures. If rates go back up to 4.5%, 5%, which was commonplace when we were younger, that's $1 trillion a year in interest on the national debt that we'll have. It's unsustainable if interest rates go back to a historic norm.
Clearly a passionate topic.
Yes.
The vein, I can see the veins from across the room in your head.
That's wrinkles.
Is that right? Oh, I thought it was veins. Yes, it's a problem, right? But how did we get there? It's the rob Peter to pay Paul mentality that, we're the U.S. and we can figure this out. Let's buy ourselves time, right? Let's do whatever we have to push this out, because if enough time goes by, we'll come up with something brilliant that reduces the deficit or generates revenue, and over time, our genius nation will figure it out.
I don't know how they're going to figure out the laws of economics. Basically, we have interest. If you're living on a credit card, it feels great while you're doing that until the interest overcomes you and you can't pay it. That's when you end up being Greece. We're a long way from Greece. I'm not saying that, but there's no way that we can continue to sustain this without affecting our standard of living and our kids' and grandkids' standard of living.
Well, we don't need to fund certain projects like, can chickens live on Jupiter? Or, can we attach wings to a mealworm? Or, do we need to give Germany, billions of dollars to protect their rich selves? I think you could segment all the areas that we put money into, or there might be lobbyists behind it or associations that are funneling.
Well, the majority of the money, truthfully, is in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and defense. Those four things are really where 80% or 75% of the money goes. And, that's a different show we're going to have to talk about. But, I don't like politicians to begin with, but when they profligate spend, then I hate them even more.
Profligate or profligate?
Profligate.
Profligate.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my thinking that if there are any young people coming out of college listening to this podcast, here's what I would say to them. Stop looking at the Joneses. Don't listen to commercials. There's no specific way you're entitled to live. You got to live on less. You got to spend less than you make. Save first. Avoid catastrophic decisions. Diversify your investments, and you'll be fine.
Dilly dilly.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to the When We Were Idiots segment. And this is a short story, but it's really embarrassing. I've told it many times to my close family, and it's quite humiliating. But I'll just tell you. So I mentioned we have my wife and I have 5 children. And I forget which one this was, because when you have that many, it kind of runs together. But my wife breastfed.
You are very fertile.
Yes. My wife breastfed our children, and that was great for me because I didn't have to get up in the middle of the night for when newborns came home. So everything's going well, but I guess this particular week we were up a lot with the baby or what have you, and I was cranky or whatever, but my wife was breastfeeding one of our children in bed in the middle of the night, and not to get too graphic, there was some sounds from that process.
Slurping noises?
Sucking noises. And it was irritating me. It shouldn't have been, but it was. So if
economics is your favorite subject, I can see how this would irritate you.
In a really weak and stupid, idiotic moment, I turned over and said, "Do you have to do that here?"
Are you sure this isn't called the When We Were Jerks episode?
And it was one of those things where, like, as soon as it left my mouth, I was like trying to pull it back, and
rewind the tape.
It was really a bad moment. And I think this speaks to how forgiving my wife was, because she handled it my wife is. She handled it really well. She gave me a look, and obviously she wasn't happy, but she didn't, kick me out of the house for a week or anything like I probably deserved. But that was, when I think back on that, I'm thinking, what in the world was I thinking? But
you were an idiot. Although, you know what? Your relationship has never been quite the same since then, so...
So anyhow, we have a little bit of extra time, Rich, if you wanted to squeeze in a story of when you were an idiot.
What? Yeah, I'll squeeze in another when I was an idiot moment. So I'm a teenager, probably 13 or 14. I'm in the street in front of our house, Cathmere Road in Havertown, and I'm just punting a football. I'm throwing a football into the trees. I'm just trying to kill some time, late afternoon. And as you know, and you can attest to this, I have a good arm.
Yeah, you do.
I was a shortstop. I was a right fielder. I threw the javelin. I can still throw a football over 50 yards. So
At your advanced age.
at my advanced age, and I'm just looking for targets. I was throwing the football at stop signs, tree trunks, whatever, and I noticed a squirrel, a black squirrel, going up an electrical line to our house. And I'm like, wow, that would be a great target, way better than these inanimate objects. So I reach back and I throw the perfect Joe Namath spiral. And it's zipping about 35 yards through the air, up into the sky. And I miss the squirrel by a good 6 inches. And it goes right through our 3rd-story window where my sister lives and was studying for a test.
With a drink in her hand.
Well, probably a drink of milk. So focused that she said she almost had a heart attack. She flipped back in her chair, landed on her back, hit her head, covered in glass.
Oh, my goodness.
And I had to go upstairs and explain myself to my
I was
parents
throwing it at a squirrel.
that I was, and even if I hit the squirrel, it probably still goes through the window. But I still to this day don't know. That was an idiotic moment in my
You
teenage
didn't think
life.
about the house behind the squirrel.
No, because I thought I was that good of a thrower, that accurate.
Confidence can be dangerous sometimes, especially with young men.
Yes, still to this day.
Okay, well, those are some good stories, and we're gonna move on to the final segment, and this is a debut segment. We're gonna call it Rich's Rant, and as Rich mentioned at the beginning of the show, sometimes you just got to get beefs off your chest, and I think this came about because I saw my neighbor not picking up after his dog. I mentioned it to Rich. He goes, "Oh, I got stories for you. I got all kinds of stories." So Rich's rant is going to be mostly geared around dog owners and what they should and shouldn't do with their dogs. So Rich ran away.
Here's the deal, and you could call it Rich's pet peeves.
We like alliteration, so we went with Rich's rant.
Rich's rant. Now, I love pets. I have a blue flame that comes out of me, invisible to humans, because I'm like the cat and dog whisperer. Whenever I sit down at family houses, our house, the cats and dogs, they sit all over me, and I just lay.
And they sniff your crotch a lot. I know that.
Which I don't mind that part. But the point is, I have a good relationship with pets. But I'll tell you what, dog owners. So I live in a close-knit townhome community, and the houses are very close together, and there's a lot of dog owners, and there's no dog park, there's no specific spot, but these folks walk their dogs up and down. And the other day, we had a big blizzard, and the very next day, it went from a blizzard to the snow completely melted. I come out to my front lawn, and there's a big dump in the middle of the pavement where my car has to back out through, and then I see an even bigger dump of defecation on the lawn. And now I turn into...
And they weren't yours. They weren't yours.
Not that I recall. I wasn't drinking that night, so I'm pretty sure they weren't mine. But then I turn into poopy forensic scientist. And I look up and I'm analyzing the size of this one's small and whitish. That's got to be a small dog. This one's bigger and clumpy and green. That's a big dog. And now I start watching dog owners to see if I can profile, that's probably your dog, and that's probably your dog. And I want to put a sign up on my lawn that says, curb your dog, and I'm just going to leave it there, or I'm going to collect it, and when I find out who it is, I'm going to put the poop on their front step.
And light it?
I won't light it on fire in a paper bag like you used to do as a prank when you were a kid. And then I'm thinking, well, am I going to be the neighborhood psycho?
It's like CSI. You're like watching people and trying to determine where the dog poop came from.
I call it a poop forensic scientist. And I have a hunch on whose dogs it is. But I'll tell you, it's happened a couple times. And I here's what I did, which I told a friend. They're like, oh, you're going to get arrested. I walked out on my driveway and I started shouting at the top of my lungs, whoever poop this is, you better clean it up or it's going to get ugly. But my neighbors are nice.
No one heard you?
I don't know if nobody came out of their house.
Someday I'll get you to talk about the proliferation of service dogs now. Now everyone's dog is a service dog. I see them on the airplanes. The other week there was a service peacock someone tried to bring on a plane. Someday we'll get that's gone haywire now.
Don't get me started on that.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that initial rant. I think we're gonna redo that some other day. So, any other comments as we adjourn the show here,
Yes.
Richie, about budgeting or immediate gratification nation?
Daddy Weaver, you're right. Listen, millennials, you're not making enough money to begin with. You're having trouble getting jobs. Save some money. Don't spend it on stupid stuff. Start saving today.
So let it be written. So let it be done. That was the Yul Brynner. Remember that from
10 Commandments?
Yeah.
Love it.
So, I'd like to remind our listeners that we want to hear from you, and we need some more Twitter followers, by the way, at Are We Idiots. Come on, follow us on Twitter. We need it. Suggestions at areweidiots.com is where you send an email to tell us what some ideas on future episodes. Tell us how we can improve. We're looking for shows now. Next week, we're going to, Rich, next week, I forgot about this. We're going to talk about the current state of our federal government. And I think there's going to be some fireworks because I think you're more approving of the status quo of our federal government than me. I'm quite cranky when it comes to our government.
Yeah, this will be frightening. Wear a helmet.
We're going to discuss many angles. Right now, I think Congress has an approval rating around the low teens. Of course, President Trump is either hated or loved. There's going to be a lot of things to talk about the current state of our federal government. So make sure you tune in next week. As we close, I wondered out loud if our federal debt was too heavy for us to bear as a nation. So listen to a little of Too Heavy by the Eric Weaver Experience. And remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See you all next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Are We Idiots Show. Please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher so you can enjoy all episodes.